Greetings, Satorians. I've been role-playing as long as I can remember. And boy, as a kid, we probably all have these fond memories of playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever our game was, and getting lost in another world. And still, role-playing is often seen as just a game. And I'm going to suggest today that it is much more, that it actually can be a spiritual experience. This probably bleeds over to role-playing games that are video game based as well. But I'm going to be talking a little more specifically about role-playing games, dice and paper, where we sit down with other people and we're primarily using our imaginations to create the world that we experience. Now, it's probably a bold claim to say that Dungeons and Dragons is a spiritual experience. But over the years, I've come to find that there is so much depth to role-playing that has literally allowed me to live more lives. And I'll explain this as we go along. You're probably familiar with these Hindu myths of Brahman essentially creating this world, becoming this world, all these things. And in doing so, being able to experience this thing that we call life or reality or existence. When we role play, this is a game within the larger Brahman game that we're playing. When we sit down with our friends, what we do around that tabletop is more than just having fun. Because what we're doing is we are mirroring Brahman's actions. We essentially are creating a world in our imaginations. When we do this, a few things happen. First of all, we momentarily step out of our little me construct. We do this whether we are dungeon mastering or we're player characters. If we're player characters, we take off the mantle of our name, our job, our career, all the labels that we put onto ourselves, and we become someone else. We discover that this is possible. In doing so, it gives us a very strong insight into the nature of the little me. For a moment, we see that this is just a piece of clothing that we're wearing. And we are able to put on a different set of clothing, to put on a different personality. If we can do that in role-playing, it may help us to see that we can do that in this game as well, in what a lot of us call real life, or here what I call Satori. Then if I find my little me getting angry or frustrated or fearful of something in this life, I might remember that those emotions, those ideas, everything that I use to frame this reality, those are just part of the little me. And what if I take on another, more courageous or more monkly or more whatever it might be, little me approach? So that is the first powerful thing that role-playing does, is it gets us in touch with what the ego is. We get to see it, and it allows us to switch the trappings, the decorations of the ego, and to see that those maybe are not as firmly implanted as we've been led to believe. Next, we start to see that in that role-playing context, the actions of our little me make a difference in the world. And this is important because in Satori, we're often given the message that our actions are meaningless, that we are essentially powerless beings. The whole worldview crafted in Satori is a mechanistic worldview in which all you are is a tiny little powerless bag of flesh that is here for a flash and is meaningless in the larger context of the cosmos. That may or may not be factually true, but believing in it is part of what creates in our culture, in this, everywhere we look around us in this game, this pervasive sense of victimhood. If you're powerless, all you can do is basically go along and be at the mercy of your emotions and your thoughts and your conditioning. And it gives us an excuse, essentially, to be our worst selves. When we get out of that victim mentality, when we start to think, okay, perhaps I'll believe that I have some meaning, my actions have some meaning, that for many of us can be transformative and start to get us to think about our actions, to act more consciously, to be more compassionate, to be more present with the people around us, to not just take the easy route out, but to do tough, to really go for our dreams. Sitting around that table, we actively participate in the creation of our world. We, through our imagination, through our interactions with others, through our interactions with the Dungeon Master, literally become co-creators of everything we experience around us. And in fact, the world that you are experiencing through your character is largely rendered, brought into existence inside of your imagination. So now we have the DM, we have the other characters, perhaps a map, some other things that create a skeleton. But your imagination does the fleshing out of that skeleton and creates the reality that you experience in that role-playing game. Now that, arguably, is very much what's going on in the world around us. There's a skeleton of reality created around us. But how I render it, how I interact with that, is going to flesh it out, is going to make a profound difference in what I experience. This is vividly made clear when one person can walk through a forest and have a horrible time, essentially. Go through there swatting mosquitoes, tripping on things, coming out and saying, this sucks. The other person can go into that forest, taste of incredible wild edibles, climb a tree and have an almost spiritual experience looking out over a grand vista, have a close encounter with some animals, read stories in the tracks at their feet. Two different sets of knowledge, two different attitudes, two different ways of rendering that same experience that create vastly different realities. We see this, of course, all the time in our interactions with other people. We can see one person go into a situation and it is seen and framed in one way, and another person can go in and have a completely opposite experience. So opposite that essentially people are having an experience of different realities. We could say interpreting those realities differently. Doesn't really matter. The important thing that I'm trying to get across here is that the subjective experience is wildly different depending on what we bring to the table. And so here it is. What are we bringing to the table when we role play and we start to pay attention to that, to discover that what I bring to the table literally has a powerful effect in creating the reality that I experience? Then it's not a big jump to take that into real life, into this game of Satori that we're all playing, and to say, what am I going to bring to the table of this game? And one of the side benefits of these games is that we get to experience all kinds of different things in life. If I get really into my character and my character dies, in a way I get to experience a part of dying. If I lose somebody precious to me, if I get to experience a different culture, for me, this was one of the hugest things about role-playing, is at this point, I feel like I have lived so many lives and experienced so many things that never actually, quote, happened in this world, but have given me a new confidence in this world because I have experienced some terrible and wonderful and mysterious and challenging things in my role playing that have built me up as a person and have built character, as Calvin's dad might say in Calvin and Hobbes. So, Dungeons and Dragons, role playing in general, it has so many gifts for us if we look deeply into it and if we play consciously. And if we can play that game consciously, hopefully it will help us start to play this game, Satori, consciously. And that's where the real fun begins. Thank you for being part of this talk with me, my friends. Share your thoughts in the comments and journey onward.